We got emails from each of the elected officials and department heads of what they felt their office could or could not do. They are the right people to decide what is best for their office. I think, I worked with someone yesterday at the senior center who works out of your office that was helping distribute the food, and she was able to do a lot of her work from home on her computer. If there's some of the offices that some of the employees can actually do their work at home and reduce the fact that you reduce the numbers. I agree with you on the 60%. I think that I don't want to do what you say and just give the finger to the president and the governor, because they are the ones that direct this. But we are a board, we're isolated. And the other part of this is White Pine County, Eureka, Lincoln, some of these real rural communities, even across the nation, Nebraska, some of these other places, Alaska, where there's zero, but we are a different type of community than New York City, San Francisco, Las Vegas, because we don't have the population. And it is really spread out, so look at our community, it's really spread out. But the direction that you're giving is very, very good. But I like the idea that we are going to maybe discuss this and allow each department head or each office to look at reducing as much as they possibly can, allowing a little bit of interaction with the community, like to come record your deed or to pay your taxes. But let's really work to a final approval where we really do 60% is good. And yet we have somebody in the office. If you walk in, you got somebody.
There's a lot of merit to what Burton talked about this morning. We don't want to close down our services if we can somehow offer it in an alternate method,
But Richard, I would like to respectfully comment in regards to what you just said, that I don't want that to be a false sense of security, the fact that we are remote, because we are the major thoroughfare coming down through Canada. We have a lot of people that stop in our community for one reason or another. So I don't want to lose sight of that, that even though we are, the most remote city so far as Ely, we have a lot of, 10,000? Mike, what was it?
a day,
10,000
passing through a day, yeah. And they're
they're
closing the border on Canada, so there's a lot more on the road right now. People are maybe pulling out early from their summer or their winter.
Quite a few, there's been quite a few coming through.
So just something to think
So
about.
I just wanted to,
They're using our bathrooms,
Of
our
course,
gas
that's
stations, our
right.
restaurants, and so we are subject to exposure, whether it's happening or not, we don't.
right, but I didn't want it to be a false sense of security, so.
Why couldn't we approve this? You've given us a list of other options that can be utilized. Why don't we approve this at the discretion of the department head to be used after the other options are exhausted? Once that there's a protocol, that the other options that you listed, we try and utilize those first, and once we get to the point where this becomes necessary, the department head has the freedom to automatically put this in place.
So I agree with that approach in theory, but here are two concerns that what I would have with that is, one, you're still asking employees to use their sick time first. It's okay to suggest that, to say, if you'd like to stay home sick, that's fine, but it's a whole other thing to make them use their sick time. So we can't make employees use their sick time to stay at home. Two, when you have vacation in the bank, it's more of an employee, I don't want to say right, because you still have to coordinate with your department head, but what we don't want is a department head saying, this just doesn't work for me, you're not going to be using those vacation days, and they're just going to expire after 30 days. We're trying to balance and encourage our department heads to allow them to use this time, and if they have control saying, you need to do this, this, and this first before I even look at that, it might discourage an employee from speaking up and saying, hey boss, I sure like to stay home with my kids this week, or I just don't want to be at work right now. Or, that's what we're trying to create, is an atmosphere to allow an employee to voluntarily stay home. And so I think some sort of approach like you're recommending is really, I think it's a good idea, but it has to be we have to look at how that's going to be addressed with the department heads.
Travis?
I just totally agree with Burton. I see both sides here, but if we're gonna pay people extra time to be off and stuff, when the people that are supporting us are hurting, that really just, to me, is just slapping the face to the taxpayer. if you're a waiter today from Rax or the Prospect or something, you're out of work, and then, you know, I don't know. I don't really know what the answer is, but I don't know if there really is a good one here.
Can I have a question?
That's where you have to make the hard decisions, unfortunately.
Can we meet these 60% objectives by staggering shifts? What's wrong with the commission telling me, Bill, you can work after 4:30, and you can work Saturday, Sunday to get your work done? And why, and I know there could be a union thing, but I think in a situation like this, I'd tell them to pound, I think was the word I heard the other day. I mean, and stagger people coming into work, you know? I mean, I think the offices can function, we can still accomplish what we're trying to do. Just ask our employees for 30 days to stagger out a little bit. And I know there's some offices that won't work as well, some are easier than others, but we can still get some of this done. And I have a hard time as a department head, let the department heads just see what works best for them. Well, maybe what works best for me is y'all take 10 days off and enjoy it, and the next office down the hall, well, we're gonna try and stagger our shifts, or, I mean, that puts the department heads in an awkward position. I mean, how is it okay for me to tell them to take 10 off, but the guy down the hallway, they're gonna stagger them out, they're gonna do whatever they need to make their office function? I mean, I think you can get these objectives and get done what we wanna do, still function as a government, and I think you can do it, because I'm with what Burton said. I mean, I think we don't wanna, I would feel awful if I was laid off right now and I knew that the county people were getting paid time off to do nothing for me I mean, and I know there's offices are a little different, but I think it can be worked out, I really do.
Well, I mean, I think to Bill's point, if the department heads get together, and if they can't stagger something, at least rotate through so everyone still has some income coming in and, you know, can make it through.
This is where I think we need to hear from our HR and our finance directors.
You definitely have issues with, you know, saying, you stay home. Yeah, like I say, you can't
Not
mandate them to stay,
everybody
you
can-
can't tell
know,
someone to
with
stay
their
home
family. Yeah,
and use time. That's why this is created, not because I thought it was a great idea to pay people to stay at home. The overall objective, however, staggering of shifts is a great idea, but another tool that can be used is to just reduce the amount of people in your office that day, okay? But you also can't tell people to stay home. And you can't tell people to stay home without pay, not with our union directives. If we're a private business owner, we could.
right.
So can we, since we can't tell them what to do, we could move forward at least with this plan to stagger and make a plan to take a look at how that's worked and see if people have taken initiative to help us with this, and if there's a lot of stubbornness going on and they're not going home, they're not staggering, things aren't happening, then we can look at what our options are in terms of fixing.
I think that we need to hear from our HR director in regards to some of this.
He's down the list here.
I just want, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to chime in, as far as a lot of what's being discussed, there's actually policies that even address catastrophic leave and quarantines. And I think before we jump ahead on that, if we could do with number one, or number two with what we did with number one, just until the department heads are heard, and I have an opportunity to share this, then the board would be, you would have a full concept of exactly maybe which direction to go.
I also want to recognize this little elephant in the room that needs to be discussed. I heard it a little bit from some of our senior department heads who have been around the block, and they know about, and we're going to hear it again with essential services, non-essential services, who gets a benefit. I remember that snow day that Gary Priya called, and it was, why do they get paid? We don't get paid. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about fairness, about the office down the hall, and I recognize that. As the public health and your emergency manager and your DA is concerned, fairness is at the bottom of my list when it comes to handling a situation like this. It sounds terrible. It needs to be considered, for sure. It can be debated, but I don't care. I mean, if my employees feel like they're treated unfairly, but I saved their lives or saved someone else in their family's life who might be living with them, it's worth it. Because we're only talking about 30 days. We're not talking about the rest of the time.
Absolutely.
So just something to, at least, I'm not saying don't consider it or don't discuss it, but at least have that in mind, that fairness is a consideration, but it also, there's some other higher principles here we're trying to achieve. One of them is not to panic and keep our services open. I get that too.
So I think just based on what the first two items we've talked about, maybe we should just go through this agenda, discuss each one, and then start back and go back, and maybe we can take an action. I really wanna hear from Dr. Bianco, because he's gonna be.
He's not really, agenda to discuss,
Okay,
like a huge update or anything like that. That's gonna be next meeting on Wednesday.
okay,
And he's also gonna be issuing a declaration later today.
okay.
But these items are more internal management for our employees.
So if the commission doesn't mind, we've done 1 and 2, we're gonna talk right down here, and then we'll go back and take action.
Yeah.
As we've heard a little bit of input from each and every person. One thing I do wanna stop right now, and I'm gonna stop it, is because we see people raising their hands, and I'm sure you all have a good idea, a good suggestion.
Yes.
But we're gonna run through this agenda the way it is, and the public comment comes before and after the meeting. If we allow comments going on, we'll be here for 2 weeks. So we're going to stay on task, on the agenda, no public comments gonna be taken. And so we're strictly gonna talk amongst this board, the DA, of course, the finance, but we are not allowing anybody else in the audience. So, if I don't recognize your raised hand, I'm sorry, there'll be public comment at the end. We're gonna go through this agenda, we're gonna discuss them all, we're gonna go back, and we're gonna to vote as we see fit. So that's the way it'll be run. So we are gonna leave 2 and go on to number 3, and each one of them will have discussion, and then we're gonna go back at the start of the meeting, and we'll go through each and every one and make a decision. How's that? Item 3. Item 3 is discussion for possible action on an update on county office closures, door closures, service rollback, and to plan to give direction to department heads on what services to further curtail. All county department heads and elected officials. I think we've kind of touched on that as we've gone through this, and we've discussed what we want to allow each department head to do. So I think item number 3 has been discussed. Unless somebody else wants to say something, we'll go back to it, because
Yeah, I'd open this up to any of your department heads that they want to speak to,
Okay.
any other measures they may have already taken, just to let the public and the commission know. I think it's important for the commission to know this, that the district court has already pretty much canceled all their hearings the next 3 weeks and suspended even jury trials. I mean, so we talk about essential services and government, I mean, yeah, they may be actually different than paying a tax bill. And you have people coming in for hearings off the street or whatever out of the jail. Only those in custody hearings, people who are actually in custody, their hearings will be heard and they'll be dealt with, but most of them by telecommunication from the jail. So, that was just the update from the courts for you guys, what they're doing. So, most of our hearings have been moved.
as what Mike said, we will allow during this particular item, each department head, they have something to say to give the commission and the public some input of how they feel, and we'll come back to it. So if there's any department head that wants to come up and speak to their department right now, please do.
Hi guys, Christy Rosich, Aquatics. As if most of you watched the governor's mandate last night, we do fall under the recreational buildings and gyms to all be closed. So I wanted to hear from you all, is that, because I know number 15 will be closed and deemed necessary, but at the same time, I want to make sure we either are leading by example, like Mike said, we're either leading by example, or I can limit the hours even more and have full-time staff only working. Elizabeth and I kind of addressed, if we do close, we kind of played with some ideas this morning about how we can handle the full-time staff so they're still able to get their hours. But if we want to follow the governor's direction at noon today, I should be locking my doors.
One of the things we discussed is because we are in this state of emergency on a statewide and federal basis, is that her staff, there may not be aquatic related things, but there are other services we can offer our citizens. We can get a list of numbers that her staff can call and reach out to people who are home alone and do a regular call system to make sure that they are okay in their homes or that they don't need anything. And do that type of service where there may not be activity in the aquatic center per se to do. There are other services that perhaps these people can do to get paid and earn their wage and still work instead of being laid off, but provide something that's really essential at this point in time for for our citizens.
They can go to other departments, help out with filing, cleaning.
Shredding.
They could go to the senior center, help out, hand out meals,
Yeah.
delivering things. But at the same time, if we wanna follow suit with the governor and the president, I should be locking my doors at noon.
See, you see how this complicates things, because they'll only be working outside their job description. We have, I talked about fairness earlier, we have union considerations, you know, where people have different work environments. And I can tell you right now, the emergency manager is gonna need volunteers over the next 30 days to help do some things in our community. So the emergency declaration also might have to address job descriptions and on a voluntary basis for employees who wish to do something else maybe.
Mike, does the declaration of emergency, does that loosen any of the rules in regards to the union?
There's nothing in our contract about it necessarily, that I recall. The only thing it's gonna do is maybe mitigate for us in arbitration.
I do believe that Tim has been in contact with the union, and they seem like they're willing to work with the county to do what needs to be done at this time. You know, obviously, those conversations would continue to need to take place,
Beforehand
but,
action.
but he has been reaching out, and they do seem like they're very willing to work with us, understanding the gravity of the situation at this
Because,
point.
I mean, I'm sure they'd rather keep their employees working than eliminate positions during the next while, so.
I'd say we just gotta stay in contact with them and take whatever lumps we get down the road at this point.
But I do think the pool should close, I really do.
I was in,
Entirely?
I think it should close entirely.
we are one of like maybe 3 left in the state that are open. At Eureka, Elko, Reno, Vegas, they've all closed.
But if the employees can be used elsewhere,
They would love to be used either in my facility or elsewhere, as long as they are continuing.
but the,
But for us.
Yeah, we made 30 years without an indoor pool, I can't say that it's essential.
And I worked at the senior center yesterday on a quick deal for Chris and that. There was a couple other employees, county employees that were, you know, worked out of their office.
Right.
The lady from the Justice Center and Mike's assistant, and they were there. So the senior center, they could get on a list and kind of do some community service that way by handing out the food, because that's all in
I
how it
think
might
they'll
be.
iron out the details.
Yeah.
Exactly, but I'm just saying,
I just need a full direction board to.
And I'm not discounting what the pool means to this community, I'm just saying, when we're looking at essential services, I just don't believe that falls in essential services. We need to keep essential services, that's the mandate.
I agree.
So would we have you then probably just work with our emergency manager to figure out
How we can
where
help.
to disperse them?
Okay.
Would that be okay with you, Brett?
Oh, yeah.
Just coordinate with her and you plug people where they
And
need to
the
be.
union, Tim.
They are not union employees, but they should still
They-
consent
Yeah.
to being redeployed in another capacity.
Okay,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just give me the option.
well, as this all, as we continue on.
Unravels.
As far as, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that directed by, sounds like the whole commission, could we just kind of say, okay, we agree on closing the pool?
Yeah, or we can leave it as written, and your
Yeah.
director's gonna close it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she can open it when she feels she'll come before the board.
Just continuing on with the agenda,
Oh,
If-
fine, okay, yeah.
so if you do decide you deem what is essential, not essential, you know, as the DA, assessor, clerk, treasurer, recorder, the elected officials, if you do deem any of them not to be essential and or to be closed at any point, it's just, I would appreciate under the NRS 245 there's a thing where you need to expressly authorize closing of any elected offices before we are allowed to. So just something to keep in mind, not saying one way or another.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And luckily, that's not, we agree, but it's not the plan right now.
Yeah.
Is there any other department head that wants to speak to anything, Bill?
Kind of went over it with a couple of our foremans, and where our jobs are a little more isolated than obviously in the offices. We talked about, we didn't know how the union would be impacted, but for our start times, we could just stagger them 10 minutes apart. One comes in, gets direction, off they go for the road department. We've already used the road department, lining out the cones for the senior center. Just kind of me, I'm thinking we might have to kind of mix some of these jobs together. We have some seasonals coming on for parks, we have them coming on for the golf course. I'm okay with perhaps maybe even not employ those people at this time. and then use the maintenance department for mowing and things like that. Once again, it's a recreational area, but you still can't let all the grass die, and I mean, you can't 30 days from now. But that's, I think we can function, as long as we're not gonna get any union lashback, I think we can just go ahead and function and stay separated and everyone be in their own vehicles. And I think it, I'm not sure if it meets what the governor wants,
No,
but
well, I'll get to that, but it's a good example of how the discretion of the department head can, I mean, Bill knows exactly how to address it. The type of work environment that his employees are already in already kind of isolates them, so that's a great example of how this board can authorize them to do that and address kind of what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, I said the road department's critical need, if we get a snowstorm, you know.
Yeah,
roads
no,
are
our
gonna be
infrastructure, this is exactly what Burton's talking about,
And we
like, we
can
have a
make it
lot of really
easy.
important things we gotta keep going.
each, and little additional costs, but we can send 2 guys out in 2 trucks. It's normally not what we do. Sometimes we do that anyway, because we have to haul so much fuel to get it to the equipment anyway, but the janitors, we visited with Lori this morning, and their cleaning duties, you know, obviously if some of these facilities close, they're gonna be less, so perhaps we can use them to continue to help serving with food at the lunch hour. You know, the maintenance, we've already got a work order set in place. Maintenance will set up the cones every day for the senior center, they'll take them down. I mean, for me, honestly, I'm super endorse what Burton said. I think we need to keep functioning as a government, and we can still, in a lot of instances, still keep this isolation and still.
My biggest concern is making sure that we are so diligent
Absolutely.
in regards to sanitation.
What about,
Gloves, you know, wipes, whatever.
you have dates that the seasonal start, can we stay on this directive and move the hiring date for the seasonals back 30 days? Utilize your people and not hire the seasonals until 30 days, I think that would be a pretty good idea. Just,
I like that.
And I like it because it keeps the full-time employees really segregated, you know, and there's always additional work. If a department has somebody that they want to get out of the office, they can always assist with different, there's always things to do, you know, so.
And your seasonals are gonna require some face-to-face training that we don't want that time spent.
so is the commission in agreement that we just delay the hiring of all seasonals at least 30 days?
I
Okay.
don't think so.
Make that.
Well, it's department head
Yeah,
discretion, so
right,
thank you.
so we'll leave that.
I-
Okay,
I just
Elizabeth
wanted to,
has a comment.
if it's okay, speak on behalf of Desi, because she is not here, I don't believe, but I did have a chance to talk with her. She was concerned that as we go through this, there may be an increased need for social services, but their thought is they don't want people coming in and out of the building, that they would call in and request what they would need, and then they would meet them curbside and deliver, so if they needed additional sanitary items or food or whatever, that it would be a curbside pickup trying to go ahead and decrease the flow of traffic through the office. So she had mentioned that, and I know that she is concerned about it, but that their office is essential during this time.
Are they gonna put signage on the front doors of the admin building then?
That is something we certainly can consider, and getting that out onto the website. But I think that, you know, we do have department, yes.
Speaking for the admin building, that's something that we talked about in our office this morning, is the idea of locking the doors, but putting signs out on the front and making, you know, calling and saying, okay, if you need to come into the assessor's office or into finance or JP or whoever, you call, we come get you, and we're mitigating some of that traffic through the building for all those offices.
Definitely
Just-
support that approach. I've just been out that building, the doors are locked, and I can't get anyone's attention before too, if I have.
We can install a temporary doorbell.
Yeah, doorbell would be
Put a battery
perfect.
out there,
Perfect.
no problem.
Yeah,
So, I definitely support that. That's a good plan. The other thing I wanted to say real quick on Bill's item, if his staff all agrees that they're gonna stagger and change everything, it'd be really cool to get some sort of confirmation with the shop steward from the union that that's what we're gonna do, and that they are approving that on every single
Yeah,
department as we
that's-
move forward.
Yeah.
So work with Tim on that.
is there any other department head that wants to speak to their department right now before we move on?
just kind of an office thing, another thing we talked about is the staggering of shifts, and we just had a little bit of a discussion, and I'm having a hard time figuring out how we would work the hours. Do we come in, have 2 people come in at 4 AM and leave at noon and 12 to 8, or do we do every other day, 3 13-hour days. I mean, so it's some of the hours just are a little bit challenging to kind of figure out
I
if
think
we
each
want to.
department head's just gonna have to talk to their people and hopefully voluntarily they'll go for it.
Yeah, it may not work for a lot of offices.
I think again, we'll back to the department head or the elected officials who kind of work that out amongst themselves and their employees and see what we can come up with that's good for everybody. Last call for department
I
heads.
would like to hear a little bit from juvenile probation. You guys have an interesting
We do, and
position.
I am hesitant to speak because the judge is my department head.
Okay.
So I'm hesitant to speak, I mean, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, I would just maybe get a statement from the court on how they want to handle it, and they'll be the department head, and we're gonna leave it to their discretion.
Seems like they got a good handle on it.
They're already.
So my suggestion is I'll amend the resolution to not only give the department heads the staffing discretion that they need, but the discretion to control their buildings and offices.
And access.
Yeah.
And maybe add in there too, Brian, that, you know, with all the approval, but employees can go to other departments and they can have that flexibility.
Work together.
Okay, we'll ask one more time for department heads, and then we'll move on. I think that's an item that we've covered, and we do not have to come back to this one, do we?
I'm just gonna say on behalf of IT that my people have to be on the ground, they have to be here, because they are a hands-on job. I have given them hand sanitizers and wipes and said, keep these in your cars, make sure but other than that, unless you want IT to fail, which is going to be more and more essential, we want them here and we want them on the ground. So I don't anticipate that I will make any change in that.
I'll tell you what I did, just real quick. I had 3 laptop computers, we had them set up with IT so that my admin staff can prepare cases and do the complaints and everything they need to do on those computers. And then I have a rotational schedule, so that right now I have 2 admin staff at home with a computer, 1 in the office. And then they have on my calendar which one's gonna be in the office. I only have 1 admin staff in the office at all times, so we can still answer phones, answer the door if we have to, and support the attorneys. Same thing with the attorneys are working from home from their personal computers. I have put in a request for 3 additional laptops, and I'll allocate that out of a certain part of my budget, because I have it. But for maybe other departments who could do something like this model, that's why I had the $20,000 declaration for Elizabeth to get some of that stuff ordered for other departments, if it's feasible. Other departments have some feedback, it's just not feasible for them to work from home. So we're just trying to throw out as many tools as we can, but that's how I limited my office. We probably reduced 75 or 80% in my office already, so.
Yeah, I think the general idea is what's gonna be best for one department's not gonna be best for others. There's not gonna be mandatory staggering or anything like that. This is just gonna afford the department heads the authority to do what's best to limit the spread of the virus, consistent with the law and best practices.
On this item, can we make it just a discussion item, or should we take an action on to allow them?
If we're gonna put in the emergency declaration that the county department heads have discretion to alter staffing to meet a 60% reduction in the office, or to attempt to strive to, then no action is necessary, number 3.
Okay. So we'll just kind of let number 3 be gone. Okay, now we'll go to number 4. We can take an action on this. This is discussion for possible action to cancel all citizens advisory board meetings for the next 30 days. This is kind of self-explanatory.
Move to approve.
Okay, motion by Travis and second by Ian. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I have a quick comment here. The Republican Party is having their convention thing, I think on the 21st. And I saw an email that said that they have moved forward with that. Do we have within emergency powers? I don't, a lot of.
This board doesn't, but Dr. Bune, if he wants to cancel it, he can issue an order.
Okay,
I mean, it's
Are you
already,
talking about the meeting at the convention center?
yes.
Would this be the appropriate time for me to talk about the convention center? Because essentially our recommendation is we've always been a hub for germs. It's just the nature of the business. And so we've always gone above and beyond, at least since I've been here. And I'm confident before
State your
that.
name.
Kyle Warbath, Director of Tourism for the record.
Thank you.
which is an advisory board. in
Okay.
capacity.
Agenda.
So we, like a lot of other departments, have gone above and beyond. We've never gotten a bad mark with cleanliness. We use bleach, like we get money back for using it. Everything is done, but we met with staff, maintenance staff, and we're taking this opportunity to go and clean the vents, shampoo the carpets. Essentially, MSHA is the only meeting that really is seen as mandatory or essential to keep the mine going. So they are still moving forward, but the convention center is leaving it up to the events to do what they feel is responsible. We're doing everything in our power to make sure that the convention center stays clean. But we've contacted all events, including the NRA banquet, Rocky Mountain Elk, and the Republican convention, saying that, hey, this is up to you.